This morning, after 16 years, families of 9/11 victims finally get to sue Saudi Arabia, accusing them of having a hand in the attacks. And this man used to play football. Now he's out to tackle City Hall.
Join the movement. Together, we can make it happen.
Michel Faulkner for mayor.
This is the Emmy Award-winning 11 News Close-Up with your host, Marvin Scott.
Good morning, everyone. The accusations have been out there for years that Saudi Arabia played a hand in the terrorist attacks of 9/11, purportedly with the knowledge of some members of the royal family. But it wasn't until last Monday that the families of loved ones who died in the attacks were finally able to file a lawsuit naming names and directly accusing the American ally of complicity in the worst terror attack in U.S. history. The lawsuit details a lengthy scenario of involvement by Saudi officials who are said to have aided some of the hijackers prior to the attacks. 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi nationals, 3 of whom had previously worked for the kingdom. The document details how officials from Saudi embassies supported hijackers Salam al-Hami and Khalid al-Midher 18 months before 9/11. Helping them find housing, learn English, obtain credit cards, and above all, how to blend into the American landscape. The Saudi embassy in Germany is named as supporting lead hijacker Mohammed Atta. The action spells out how money was secretly funneled from charitable organizations in Saudi Arabia to al-Qaeda. Andrew Maloney is an attorney with the firm of Kreindler & Kreindler that filed the suit on behalf of the families.
So there are government officials that are appointed to be in charge of each of the charities. They know what's going on with the charities. They know that the money is being used as that the charity is being used as a pass-through to go to support training camps in Afghanistan, terror cells in Hamburg, Germany, and hijackers once they got to the United States.
The Saudis reportedly used a variety of means to conceal the money trail to al-Qaeda. President Bush and Obama had resisted efforts to hold Saudi Arabia accountable in the past because it's an important ally against Iran. Congress last fall overrode a veto by President Obama, permitting Americans to take legal action against countries that support terrorism. Retired Deputy Fire Chief Jim Riches lost his 29-year-old son Jimmy on 9/11. He was there when his body was recovered from the rubble. He says he's waited 16 years for this day.
It makes me feel good that, to finally know that we're going to get these people into court. We want our day in court. We want to prove that they were there. If they did nothing wrong, they have nothing to fear.
Though ultimately damages from this suit could run into the billions of dollars, Riches says he's looking for something else.
It's not about the money at all. We want to find out what happened. We want to make these countries held accountable, terrorists be held accountable, countries that sponsor them, and we want to keep terrorism out of the United States.
And it's good to have Andrew Maloney in the studio with us. He and a legal team from Kreindler & Kreindler, they've spent 15 years building this case. Good to have you with us. Every attorney is always confident about his case. How solid is your case against Saudi Arabia?
We have a very solid case. We've been collecting information for close to 15 years. We started investigating back in 2002, and we filed our first action in 2002 against other individuals, and a lot of them were Saudi-centric entities, charities, banks, and individuals. And we waited till now for the law to change to be able to sue the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia itself.
Now, we glossed over some of the specifics in that report, but let's get into more detail. We talked about some of the hijackers being assisted by Saudis 18 months before the attacks. Can you be more specific?
Yeah, in Los Angeles and San Diego, there were 2 hijackers. This has been pretty well documented. A lot of this information is also contained in the recently released 28 pages from the 9/11 Commission last summer. Was finally made public. A lot of it was redacted. We had some of this information before, but these 2 hijackers were assisted by 3 or 4 different individuals that were employed by the Saudi government in Los Angeles and in San Diego. When they arrived, they were known al-Qaeda terrorists. They had trained in Afghanistan. They were known to the Saudi government to be al-Qaeda. And yet we had an individual that was attached to the Los Angeles consulate for Saudi Arabia, who was also a cleric at a local mosque in Los Angeles, assist those hijackers when they first arrived with money and with support, and introduced them to other Saudi officials, lower level officials at that point, to get them set up in apartments and sign leases and co-sign leases and get them acclimated to American society and eventually into flight schools down in San Diego.
Now, some of them, I understand, even had markings on their passports indicating they were al-Qaeda sympathizers.
That's correct. We haven't seen all the passports. A lot of them were not recovered. But in the case of Mihdar and Hamzi and one of the gentlemen that assisted him, Omar Bayoumi, they had a special marking in their passport, which we've alleged as an indication of an al-Qaeda member or an al-Qaeda sympathizer. And this was something that was obviously put in there by an official connected to the Saudi passport and immigration. That's not the only passport issue that we've seen. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, a Pakistani, received a Saudi passport. He was not a Saudi citizen. We know now that he was a mastermind of 9/11. He got an illegal Saudi passport. There were visas that were granted by the Saudi government for some of the terrorists and some of the gentlemen I just mentioned, Mr. Bayoumi and Bassan, were here on visas that were incorrect. They were actually deported after 9/11 when it was determined that they weren't here, that they didn't state properly their affiliation with the government.
Now, also going to Mohammed Atta. Now, he was from supposedly the Hamburg cell, but he, according to your lawsuit, was aided by Saudis in Germany.
Yes, the Saudis, through charities in Germany and other countries around the world, and through their consulates in various places in the world, they had a Ministry of Islamic Affairs, and that is the connection. That's a part of the Saudi government, and it's run through the embassies and consulates for the Saudis. And they assisted the hijackers in getting acclimated to Western society and providing financial and logistical support.
Now, I found one of the most fascinating parts of this whole lawsuit here, the fact that you point out that the Saudis had ways of funneling money to jihadists, in particular al-Qaeda, through the system of charities which were government run. Would you be more specific about that?
Sure. We call it money darkening, as opposed to money laundering, where you try to launder and clean dirty money from an illicit operation. This is the reverse. You had clean money, we'll call it oil money from the kingdom, that they darkened. They didn't want to just hand it to a terrorist, so they would send it to a charity, and the charity would then fund the training camps in Afghanistan, for example, or fund hijackers once they left Afghanistan or Saudi Arabia.
And these were government run, and the people who were running these charities were appointed by the government?
Yeah, they were Saudi officials. The charities are not like charities you see in the U.S. or in the West. These are charities that are an arm of the government. The part of the Islamic creed is to do charitable good works, to donate money to charitable good works. So the government set up charities, and in this case, many of these charities were, in some cases, doing some good works, and in other cases, doing nothing charitable. But in both cases, money was transferred from the al-Qaeda sympathizers in and outside of the government through the charities directly to al-Qaeda. Now,
one of those charities, Haramain?
El Haramain.
That was designated by the United States as a supporter of terrorism.
Correct. A global, especially designated global terrorist organization.
Okay, now the question is about Saudi royals. You don't name anyone in this lawsuit, but it comes through very loud and clear that there were some members of the royal family who were complicit in the attacks.
Let's be clear. There are plenty of Saudi royals that I think are good people, as many of the Saudi citizens are, and many of the government officials. But there is a segment of the royal family. There is a segment of government officials in Saudi Arabia that are sympathizers with Islamic Jihad and al-Qaeda, and they funded them for many, many years leading up to 9/11, and I think to some extent continue to fund them. We don't have this in our complaints, not part of our action, but ISIS now, we had the attacks in London recently, and ISIS is claiming credit for that. There is some information to believe that there is money and personnel coming out of Saudi Arabia that supported ISIS.
Now, what would be the motive? What would be behind this? I mean, for years, Saudi Arabia has been our ally, most principally against Iran. Why? It's so duplicitous here.
They've taken advantage of their position in the Middle East in terms of Iran. Iran has been an enemy of the United States since 1979. They've been an enemy of Saudi Arabia for much longer than that, and they continue to be today. And so naturally, the Saudis have wanted to cooperate fully with the United States and the United Kingdom and other Western governments on any information about Iran. And we have been blinded to that relationship and not looked at what's going on inside and outside of Saudi Arabia.
Now, this has taken 16 years to finally come about because there had been a law in the books that we Americans could not sue a country that may have been involved in terrorist activity until last year when Congress overrode the JASTA law. That's the... Just spell it out.
Yeah, it's Justice Against Sponsored Terrorism Act. Let me make a slight correction in what you said. The statute you're talking about originally is the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act, and it did afford immunity to foreign governments for certain courses of conduct. Not everything. There's lots of exceptions to that immunity. There was an argument made by some of the lawyers in this case that the immunity provisions never applied to Saudi Arabia. That the Saudis won in court, and that case was dismissed, and it was up on appeal. It actually went up and down twice, and was on appeal when JASTA, that you just referred to, was passed in Congress. JASTA stands for the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act. It was passed unanimously by both houses in Congress, which is a feat unto itself and a credit to the Congress. It was then vetoed by President Obama, and then Congress overrode the veto, the first and only time President Obama was overridden, and it is now law.
Now, this permits the lawsuit that was filed last week. Now, in the lawsuit, you basically say here, you go as far as saying that 9/11 could never have happened without the support of the Saudi Arabians.
That's absolutely true. Without Saudi support, you can't have the Afghanistan training camps for al-Qaeda that went on for a decade, more than a decade. You can't have people moving around the world so easily that need passports and visas and money, frankly, and connections. You can't have any of that without official sponsorship, without government support at some level.
Andrew Maloney, thank you very much. This case is going to go on, no doubt, for many years. And if any of the Saudi Arabians would like to come on the program and hear their story, we welcome them. Thank you.
Thank you.
When we come back, the candidates are lining up to challenge Bill de Blasio in this year's mayoral election. You'll meet one of the candidates right after this break. They're off and running. Already 3 candidates have declared that they are challenging Mayor de Blasio in this year's mayoral election. 2 Republicans, 1 independent, former NYPD detective Bo Dietl, real estate sales executive Paul Massey, and former Jets defensive lineman turned minister Michel Faulkner.
I believe that I have the experience, the expertise, and the passion to bring our city together in unity. In New York City.
Reverend Faulkner had a previous run for office back in 2010 when he sought Charlie Rangel's congressional seat. Good to have you with us.
Thank you, Marvin. It's a pleasure.
So, Reverend, in that you said you have the passion to unify this city. That's a big undertaking. How do you plan to do that?
Absolutely. Well, New Yorkers are great people. Hardworking, determined. We love being here. But right now, we're the exit capital of the world. We've lost, since 2000, we've lost almost 1.8 million people, residents, leaving New York City. We've got to bring New York City back together, get people working together. We've got enough smart minds to fix the problems. We don't need big government solutions or a government advocate to manage us. We just need to come together as New Yorkers and take back our city.
You know you face big odds. What makes you so confident that a Republican in a city that is 5-1 Democrat is ready to elect a Republican mayor this year?
Marv, I'm more than a Republican. I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican in terms of my political ideology, but I'm also New York. I am New York. New Yorkers have elected Republican mayors many, many, many times, and they've shown and proven that they don't really care about the partisanship. It doesn't really matter. What really matters is, do I have the heartbeat of the people? And right now, the middle class is being pushed out of New York City, being oppressed by this taxation that we have, this huge tax burden that we're bearing. And we just cannot stand up under it anymore. We need to shore up the middle class. We need to fix some of the problems and not pander to them in political speak.
Sounds all very good, but let me ask you, you say your effective style of leadership would be superior to what you call the subpar performance of the current administration. Just
Absolutely.
explain how you intend to do that.
Okay. In every community where there's a problem, there's a community leader that has a solution. We will replicate those best practices and eliminate failures. Our current administration has not eliminated any failures. You know, just for schools, just for one example, he's only closed 8 failing schools. We spend $22,500 per year per student to educate our students, and most of the 80% of the Black and Latino students in the system right now are failing. That is unacceptable, and yet the budget increase is still $1 billion more to throw at education. It's just one example of continuing to throw money at a failing system
So
rather
you
than
advocate
fixing it.
more charter schools.
I advocate more charter schools, more parent involvement in the overall education, after-school programs, vigorous and robust after-school programs, and generally having people, when I go, I do a lot of campaigning. I've knocked on over 6,000 doors. I do a lot of campaigning in housing projects in places where disadvantaged people live. And this is what I say. I say, listen, the schools are good. We send broken kids to our schools and expect the schools to fix them. They can't fix them. We need to take responsibility, and people cheer. They understand that we have responsibility. It's not the school's responsibility to raise our kids. It's ours as the community, as parents. I will get the community involved. I will get parents involved. I will bring the collaborative unity to the process to fix the problems rather than throwing money at it, hoping that it works.
Now, would that be your priority? I mean, they have so many problems in the city. You got homelessness, you got affordable housing. How would you tackle those problems?
Okay, homelessness. We have to separate out why a person is homeless, and we have to separate people who are mentally and emotionally in need of support from those people who are homeless because of economic situations.
The city seems to have failed on that score.
Oh, absolutely. The city has failed miserably, and one of the big problems came when the state pulled the money from the management of mentally and emotionally disturbed people, you know, and it pulled that money out, and now that pool of people came, you know, mixed in with the homeless population. So you have to separate that out. You have to then identify those people who right now who are struggling to pay rent, who are on the verge of being homeless, and you have to shore them up, and then you have to identify places and ways to do that. We had you
have to get them out of the homeless shelters.
You
there
have
are
to get them out of the
60,000 a night, and people are afraid because the security is so poor in these shelters.
It's horrible. We had a homeless shelter in my church that I pastored, and what we found was it was an amazing system. Now this is the way it worked. A person who was drug or alcohol free was qualified for this religious, I forget exactly what it was called, but it was a shelter in a religious institution, and every night they would be dropped off by an intake center, and in the morning they would be picked up. People loved it because there were college students, there were working people that were in that program. That's a marvelous program. We'll bring it to scale and bring it back.
Okay, let's take a break. I want to talk about other priorities, talk about crime, talk about affordable housing, and so many problems in the city and how you would tackle it if you were our next mayor. Stay with us as we continue our conversation with Reverend Michel Faulkner, a candidate for mayor. We're back with the Reverend Michel Faulkner. He's a Republican candidate for mayor in this year's election. You say you're the new Republican face in New York City. Do you have the support of the county leaders and of Ed Cox, who's the chairman?
Well, absolutely. I mean, they're supporting as much as they can because we're in a primary. And so, but I know I have the message that resonates. I have the crossover appeal. I have the ability to have Democrats vote for me in November. And that's what's important.
Of the county county leaders, the Republican county leaders, endorse you? Or
well, no, there has been no official endorsement yet, but I am pursuing that endorsement. I'm also pursuing the endorsement of the Conservative Party and several other lines as well.
All right, let's touch on some of the time we have left. Let's talk about some of the other issues and how you would tackle them. Let's talk about one of the biggest issues in New York, and every mayor talks about affordable housing. Mayor de Blasio is providing some. No one has provided as much housing since Mayor Ed Koch.
And Mayor de Blasio allowed the 421A program to pass away, and now has to be renewed or restored in order to get developers to come back to the table to build affordable housing. Affordable housing is a difficult problem. You need a long-term solution. This mayor does not have it. Nobody has talked about it.
What's your solution?
We need to sit down at the table and bring people together to talk about it. The first thing we need to do is we need to put a cap on what we're spending in property taxes right now to decrease the amount or to cap the amount of property taxes that we're paying right now or collecting right now. We need to put a cap on that to give people some breathing room, the property owners, especially small property owners. And then we need to come together with developers and talk about exactly what we need and how we're going to do this and where the profit margins are for going forward.
Crime is at its lowest level in New York history.
In February, we had 28 shootings in 28 days. 48 shootings in 28 days. It was one of the most deadly months that we've had. We're not hearing all the reports. We don't feel safe anymore. The reason we don't feel safe, Marv, is because we have a mayor who doesn't like our police force. You know, they work together, but
how would you tackle it?
Police community unity. Blue ribbons stand for police. We hold them accountable, we affirm them, and we appreciate them. The unity of the police and the community working together is unmistakably the best thing that we can do for crime.
Now, Reverend, reading your papers here, I see that you favor in some form the stop and frisk.
Stop, question, and frisk was an effective tool when the community was involved. The community gets involved, it's great because it helps protect those communities. There was a guy standing next to me when I launched. A Times reporter asked him about this question. He said, when I was a lawbreaker, I didn't want stop, question, and frisk in my community. Now that I'm a law-abiding citizen, I want it back. People feel safer if they know, because if you have something to hide, obviously you don't want to be stopped, questioned, or frisked. But the community must be involved if it's going to be effective.
So you see some merits.
So I see some merits, absolutely.
Now, you are a supporter of President Trump, but you take issue with some parts of his immigration policy, particularly dealing with sanctuary cities, of which New York is one of them.
Right. I don't like the term sanctuary cities. I will push to make sure we don't have that status, because sanctuary city says that we're going to protect lawbreakers. We're going to protect felons that simply, that have their immigration status is they're undocumented. We're going to protect undocumented felons. I will not protect undocumented felons. No way that we're going to be a sanctuary city where we're going to protect those people. We're going to turn those people over to ICE to be deported, as they should be, because we want our city safe.
Now, many out there are saying that Mayor de Blasio's got a good shot at re-election now that the cloud of corruption has been lifted from him by the U.S. Attorney. And you got Paul Massey out there, who's a real estate executive who's amassed a small fortune. How are you going to go up against them?
Listen, having money with no message is not good. I am New York. I'm speaking to the people who are going to vote. Money does not buy votes. Money gives you influence in the media, but it doesn't buy you the appeal of the people. I am the people's mayor. I am the people's candidate. Believe me when I tell you, when we have our rallies, when we have our talks, the places where I'm going, people are resonating with our message. It is very, very clear. And we will have the money that we need, Marv. There are more and more people coming on board our movement every day.
And as you say in your campaign, you're the city's last hope for stemming the progressive movement.
Absolutely. This progressive movement listen, our mayor took it upon himself to protest the president. What good is that to the citizens of New York City? Okay, he didn't like the outcome of the election. Okay, but you've got a job to do as the mayor for New York City. This progressive movement, he has been more interested in being this leader of this progressive movement than he has been of being the mayor of New York City. He has not served the city well. I will replace him in November. I will be the next mayor for New York City.
Okay, we're going to hear a lot more from you and all the other candidates who will surface in the months ahead. Reverend Michael Faulkner, Republican candidate for mayor of New York. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Marv.
And that'll do it for our program for this week. If you have any comments or wish to see this broadcast again, log on to our website, pix11.com/newscloseup. I'm Marvin Scott. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everyone.